Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, I muted my thing. There we go. Sorry, what were you saying? What were you saying, Essie?
Sorry, thank you very much.
Okay. Hope you're well. We've been missing you.
I've been having some difficulty waking up at 1.
1 in the morning of all times to have difficulty waking up.
Yeah, sorry about that.
All right. I hear you. Okay, we started Boyer last night, and we got up till Siv Vav in the Mechaber. Siv Hey in the Mechaber, sorry. And now we're going to do the Alter Rebbe starting from Siv Aleph. HaBoyer hu me'avis melachas, shekem b'mishkan hu yu boyer ha'psoilis metech ha'sam monim, lefikach kol ha'boyer psoilis metech oichel afilu b'yareachas v'afilu k'dei lechal ha'alter chayev. Separating is one of the categories of labor forbidden on Shabbos by scriptural law. Because when constructing the sanctuary, forgive my English here, I'm just reading their translation, they would remove undesirable matter, which is what we call psoilis, from the herbs they used to make the dyes. Therefore, anyone who separates undesirable matter from food is liable, even if he uses only one hand, and if he does so in order to eat the food immediately thereafter. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe starts off and tells us the way they used to do it in the Mishkan, which was bad from good. So therefore, if you do it bad from good, even by hand, even for immediate use, that is the primary method of prayer. That's what they used to do in the Mishkan. As we're going to see later, if you do it with the keli, it's also even good from bad. For later use, even good from bad also. But bad from good is what they did in the Mishkan, and therefore it's forbidden even if everything else seems to be good. Okay, and Alter Rebbe adds, even if it's done by one hand, like we mentioned. Okay, we continue and we say, nevertheless, one who separates from undesirable matter in order to eat it immediately, thereafter is only liable when he separates it using a sifter or a sieve. For these are the means commonly employed to separate undesirable matter. All right? Sifter or a sieve. These are utensils that are designed specifically to select. But if he used a funnel or a large tray, we explained yesterday that the funnel is basically wide on the top and narrow on the bottom, and you just kind of shake it so that the round things will go down, and similarly with a large tray. So he is pater from Minat Torah, because it might lead to doing with a napo and kvara, but it's forbidden midrabanan. Now, if he uses his hand and he intends to use it immediately, it is permissible. Because taking the food from the waste in order to eat it immediately is not similar to a malacha at all. This is the way of eating. Pay very close attention to these words, because this is the basis for the whole idea of why we're allowed to select in certain ways. It is considered the way of eating. Why? The Alter Rebbe explains. It's impossible to eat everything, the food with the waste. That's impossible. Therefore, the Torah only forbade to do it with a kli that is used for it, which is an apun kvor. So therefore, as long as you're doing it right before you're eating it, taking the good from the bad, you're not using a keli, that is simply the way to eat. It's not that that's a permissible form of brayer. That is not called brayer. That is called derech achila. That's just the way to eat. But when it comes to taking the psoiles, even if you do it right before you eat, that is not called derech achila. Ela derech tikun ha'ochel shehei roi la'achila. Rather, that is considered that you're fixing the food in order to make it fit for eating. That's something else. Even though you're doing it right before eating, And even though that's enabling you to eat, but because you're taking away the bad from the good, what are you doing? You're preparing the food to eat it. You're not eating it. You're preparing the food to eat it. You're doing tikkun, you're fixing it. Just like when you're cooking, you're fixing the food to make it ready to eat. That's not called eating. It's called fixing. There it's cooking and here it's selecting. But it's still not part of eating.
Strict about eating sunflower seeds, nuts, like pistachio and stuff, only because, well, correct?
No. Eating nuts, pistachios, sunflowers, and so on is not a boyer issue.
Well, if you put your bag in your hand in the bag and you can pick up just the shell without the food, so what are you going to do? Put it back or the side?
No, you're going to put it on the side.
Because you just took some out of food.
No. The Mefarshim explain, if you put your hand in with an intent to take oichel, and by mistake you took psoilos, that's not considered you did a malacha. That's like masasik. You made a mistake. That's not called you did a malacha. The reason the Alter Rebbe says, the whole reason we don't do it, which is only a Chabad thing, by the way, it's not maybe he brings it down. Ben Ish Chai brings down a lot of Ashkenazi chumras. That's why Bavadia Yosef doesn't hold him so much, because he doesn't like Ashkenazi chumras. But I'm saying, the Alter Rebbe says, no. Alter Rebbe says two reasons. First of all, Alter Rebbe says is that after you break them open, you might have a pile of good pistachios. And then, in other words, you're not eating it one by one. You're breaking open a few. And then there might be a shell mixed into them, and you won't realize, and you'll take it out. So it's like a gzeira. You understand? Another thing the Alter Rebbe says is that the shells are muktzah. Absolutely. It's not just, those nuts are examples. It's the same thing with walnuts, almonds. I mean, pecan, it makes no difference. Those are examples. According to Alter Rebbe, you should not eat any of those things on Shabbos because of these problems.
So shelled before.
Of course. I'm talking about shelling them. If you shell them before, it's not a problem. As far as why it's not boyer, when you crack them open, even though you're taking away the bad.
Not when you crack them open, when you pick them up.
When you pick them up, you're picking up what you want. You're picking up what you want. So the truth is that taking off a shell is actually, it's not even a boyer issue. It's actually a dosh issue. Dosh is when they would crush the grain to take away the husk of the grain and get threshing, exactly, and get to the food inside. So that's actually a dosh issue. I'm not saying it is dosh. I'm saying that if you want to ask, the question would be why you wouldn't ask why it's not, but you would ask why it's not dosh. After all, you're taking away the covering to get to the inside. So that's the answer, that it's considered derech achila. Now, why is that derech achila and not when it comes to grain? That we'll discuss in Shin Chaf Aleph, because that's the sugya of dash. Actually, no, I think it's actually later in Shin Chaf, in Shin Yutes. I think it is in Shin Yutes, exactly.
So the Alter Rebbe not holding that is from Isur Borer, it's from the other two reasons that you brought.
One of them is a gzeira of boyer. It's not actual boyer, but you might do boyer if there's a shell mixed in. And muktzah, yes.
So are we allowed to separate the health from the psolis inside the mouth?
Absolutely. In the mouth, you can take out the psolis too. If you get a piece of psolis in your mouth, you don't have to swallow it. You can take it out. You find a hair, an eggshell, go right ahead, take it out. That's definitely derech achila. That's not derech boyer. That's derech achila. If you have something in your mouth, it's no good. No, you can take it out. Definitely.
So no, but I mean that's like a regular thing to do. It's just separating both in the mouth.
You don't have to separate in the mouth. You just take the good from the bad. Why do you have to? That's what we're learning now. You don't have to put the bad in your mouth.
No, but in case that not to incur in water, like you take a couple of seeds inside in the mouth, and then you we crack them and
if you crack them in your mouth?
right?
Yeah, you
You take
You can take it out.
the pezoles.
Yeah, you can take it out if you crack it in the mouth. Yeah. Yeah.
Try walnuts.
I actually wonder about the way they eat pitzuchim in Israel. How they? I'm just saying the way they eat it. A lot of people, they eat it one by one, and they spit out the shell. That's it. So they never make a pile. The whole thing of the Alter Rebbe is you're going to make a pile, and then there'll be a shell left in the nuts, and you'll take it out. It never happens because they never make a pile. And muktzah, they just spit it out. They don't care. Mess, not mess. I don't know. I don't do it, and I'm not saying it's allowed. The Alter Rebbe said not to. We don't do it. But I wonder if the Gzeiros should apply in people who always do it that way. I don't know. Question? No question. Okay. Yes, exactly. That's the Minhag HaMakam in many parts of the Holy Land. Okay, so however, taking out the bad is not considered a way of eating. Rather, it's a way of fixing the food so that it should be fit for eating, and it is considered an absolute malacha. Excuse me, and therefore, even if there is more oichel than psoilas, there's more good edible stuff than waste that you cannot eat. And there is more of a tircha to remove the oichel because there's more of it. Nevertheless, you should not select the psoiles even in order to eat it right away. And this is, as we mentioned, because by Yom Tov it says to take whatever is less of a tircha, and here the Alter Rebbe points out not to do that, always to take the oichel no matter the tircha. All right, yes.
Well, we're removing the oil from the pezoles with the hands.
Yep.
We need to complete everything, or we can just remove and eat.
Either way.
Either way.
That is exactly what the Gemara says. If you remember, we had yesterday a brisa when we were learning the Gemara. It said, "Boyer oichel, boyer umaniach." You could either do boyer and eat, or you can do boyer and put down. That means you can either do boyer and literally put it into your mouth, or you can do boyer and put it down. You can prepare the salad before you eat it. You don't have to make one piece of lettuce at a time. You can actually do the lettuce, cucumbers.
How long?
For the meal.
Or just for the meal?
For the meal, exactly. For the meal, that's what we're learning. Later on in the day is no good.
I mean, if you already have a plate,
Yep.
right there in front of you, can you do this, separate and then eat, separate and eat?
What do you mean? Explain. Give me an example. Fish, yes.
Fish. You got the bones, then you take the bones, and while you are taking the bones, you eat the meat. Or do
The best way to separate bones from fish is to take the meat from the bones. So it's like to hold the bones down in their place, not move them. Take the meat away from the bones and eat the meat. That's the best way. There is room to be lenient even to remove the bones from the fish. We mentioned it yesterday, and we'll get more into it later. Yesh makom la'atir, there is room to be lenient. But if you want to ask the best way, that's the best way. But in any case, you don't have to do it bite by bite. You could do the whole fish and then eat the whole fish. Or you could do bite by bite, whatever you want. Beis. V'chein ha'boyer oichel mitoch ha'psoiles sheloi lechal la'alter. El la'nicha loichel la'achar zman afilu bebayim nasa keboyer la'oitzer v'chayim. Lefi sheloi shayach kan le'mer derech achila kachu kevin she'inoi oichel la'alter. Similarly, one who separates food from the undesirable matter without intending to eat it immediately, but rather to set it aside and eat it later, even on that same day, is considered as separating for the purpose of storing away, and hence is liable. The rationale is that it cannot be said that this is the way one eats, and he is therefore separating in a permissible manner, since he does not intend to eat the food immediately. So again, based on the fact that the whole heter to take the food and eat it is that that's the way of eating. If you're not planning to eat it immediately, it's no longer the way of eating. It goes back to being regular boyer, and therefore it is nasa boyer. It's just the same as doing it for a storage house, and it is chayiv. Even though it's not for a storage house, it's for later on in the day. Kol shusam chasuda mutal ritzach koloisa suda fapishati moshech izazman ya ba 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 ya ba ba vafilu acher mesubanim mutal livra ritzach kulam mishtam virasad lach asuda mekach klum kivan sheberer beheter ubilvan shelo yarim. Eating immediately is defined as directly before meal. If, however, one will not eat until after some time passes. Notice how the translator here translates the word la'achar shah, after an hour, as after some time passes. Some say it actually means an hour, literally an hour, that you have 1 hour before the meal to prepare. But most people don't say that. Most people say shah in this context does not mean an hour. It means a time. There's no time. You have to do it right before the meal. Like we're going to see later, when the men leave shul. When the men leave shul, the women can start. Why? Because as soon as they're done, they'll be able to eat. There's no time span in between. But again, like I said, some people literally say it's an hour. However, shortly before a meal, it is permitted to separate everything necessary for that meal, even though the meal will extend over a rather lengthy period of time. Even if others are dining with him, one is putting separate food for all of them. Now, even though you're separating for dessert, and before the dessert you have to do kiddush and challah and fish and meat and whatever else, so you're literally not getting to the dessert for 2 hours, doesn't make a difference. That's all part of this meal. You don't have to stop in the middle of the meal and go start separating. You can prepare it in advance because it's considered immediate use. Anything in the upcoming meal is considered immediate use. If some of the food, once separated before the meal, remains after the meal, it is of no consequence because his act of separation was permitted, provided he did not act with deception. Meaning to say, we do find sometimes you are allowed to act with deception. For example, in Hilchos Yom Tov, we see in some cases you're allowed to cook with the specific intent in your mind, can't say it, but in your mind you know that you want to eat for the second day. You want to make extra for the second day. You're going to eat some of it on the first day, and you're going to eat the rest of it on the second day. As long as you don't say it, and you do it in the morning, and you actually eat that part that you had in mind for the first day, that's allowed. It's a lot of details in it, but there is such a concept of harama. We sometimes allow you to make a trick. You're cooking on the first day in the morning, you put in some extra for the second day. Here the Alter Rebbe says clearly there is no harama. You're not allowed to do any extra boyer and say, well, I'm anyway separating. I'll make a little bit of an extra salad for shalosh shidduchos. Can't do that. And like I mentioned yesterday, the Mishnah Berurah says it's chayev chatas. It's an actual Torah violation, not just chumrah not to do that. It's actually absolutely forbidden to do any extra.
Ask you something similar yesterday. Let's say you picked up a few things, for a few kids to eat, to from school, take it home.
Yep.
2 kids ate, the third it doesn't.
You don't have to force them to eat. You have to have done it for them to eat. Whether they choose to eat or not, you can't control that. Just like your guests. You make a salad for all the guests. They're not in the mood. They don't eat it. Fine. You have leftovers. That's okay. But you have to have made it with the intent that it should be used right away.
So the didn't use it, you can use it later.
Yeah, Alter says that right here. If some of it remains, you can have it later, no problem. Ein Isur Mishum Bayer number 4. Ein Isur Mishum Bayer Ela Bayer Pseles Me Oichel Oile Hapach.
I asked you similar. Okay, I ate once and you leave the rest. Because I have the intention to do it.
If you have the intention, you can't do it. It's only if it's left over. But you have to, when you separate, you have to be planning to eat it all immediately, or serve it all immediately, and the people might eat it, might not. But you can't make any tricks.
So you always have to prepare how much you think you're going to need for that meal.
Exactly. And if you have guests, like I mentioned last night, you're allowed to prepare a little bit extra, just so it shouldn't look like you're, stingy and serving them exact, but nothing beyond that.
So basically, you shouldn't send your guests with the baggy bags with food, whatever left over.
No, if there is leftover, you could send them. You shouldn't make it on purpose so that they should have to take home with them. But if there is and they want to take home, why not? Vakasha. Just like you can have it yourself later. If there's leftover, you could give it to them. Why not? Question? No.
Yeah, but right now I'm doing kind of a boil.
Why is it boil? You have chicken here, you have rice there, you have putting it in little containers and you're giving it. Ein Isur Mishum Bayer Ela Bayer Pseles Me'ochel Ela Hefech. Avalim Bayer Oichel Me'ochel. Dalet. Afilu ein chofetz lechel klal ela echad mehem v'ashinet levazork and nikapsel shel kach over la'achila. Ulefikach more deliver oisem mitech oichel shechavitz lechel v'in bazem v'shum bar pseles mitech oichel. V'meinei roi ela mitech adchak. I'm just reading the Hebrew first. V'meinei roi la'achila mitech adchak af b'shem nikapseles gomer v'nis b'vrei rosem and atoyra v'ikal mokay masam adivei seifim kumei b'pseles gomer. Lachain also lahasir ha'olin hamu upashim and a york shikar and salatin afilim hin ru'in la'achila gedei adchak. Excuse me, ela yiver ha'york and ha'olin nahinu oichum tech ha'pseles. V'tzoch lizorsh le'liver ha'lachi, it says basic nesses. She'esem l'chutzud ha'mamish. Asmer to liver ha'komash ha'tzach lechom mimena b'yisa soda.
What are we mentioning? But in offer, it's Minasam is okay.
Yeah, because he's not talking about two minim. He's talking about the same min. He's going to explain. That's hey. He's going to explain that in hey. Pamed Ramamurim min echad.
Where?
Hey. In hey, he explains that which he said in Dal is only min echad. If it's two minim, it's different.
Okay.
So this seif, as we're going to see, is only talking about if it's the same type of food. Here goes the English. The prohibited act of boyer. There's many details in that.
Some fish and fish, two different types of fish, it's still under the category of fish.
No, two different types of fish are definitely two different species. Salmon and tilapia is two different types of foods. Doesn't make a difference. Shnei mine dogim. Oichel ma'oichel is two different pieces. Different pieces of the same type of fish. You can separate, like we're going to see later, small pieces from big pieces, triangular from, round, whatever, as long as it's the same type of food. The prohibited act of boyer, I'm reading the English on 4. The prohibited act of boyer involves only separating endosome matters from food of the opposite. If everyone separates one food from another, and again, like we're going to see, we're talking about the same type of food. Even if he only wants to eat one of the foods and takes the other and discards it, again, all same type of food for some reason. He only likes the big pieces, not little pieces, whatever it is. His act does not cause the undesired food to be deemed as waste matter since it is still edible. Therefore, it is permitted to separate it from the food that he desires to eat, Doing so is not considered as separating undesirable matter from food. Even if undesirable food is only edible under trying circumstances, it is not deemed as undesirable matter in an absolute sense, and a scriptural prohibition is not involved in its separation. Nevertheless, it is forbidden to separate according to rabbinic laws if it were absolute waste. I'm just reading that I'll explain. Therefore, it is forbidden to remove spoiled leaves from the vegetable called lettuce, even if they're edible under trying circumstances. Instead, one should select the suitable vegetable leaves from the spoiled leaves. One must be careful that the separation is not made until after those attending the Shabbos morning services depart from the synagogue, so that it may be made directly before the meal, at which time it is permitted to select everything he needs to eat from during the meal.
Didn't we learn differently yesterday that you could take these spoiled leaves out if they were still edible?
No. Yesterday we learned it in the Ramah that midoraisa you're allowed to take the spoiled leaves out if they're still edible, because they're edible and they're also salad, they're also lettuce, so they're min echad. However, midirabanan, we said yesterday and we're saying it again today, since it's not edible under normal circumstances, you wouldn't normally eat those leaves of lettuce. You would only eat it if you were desperate. So midirabanan, it is considered psilas, it is considered waste, and therefore you should not take the bad, i.e. those leaves, from the good, which are the rest of the leaves, but rather vice versa. Take the good leaves from the bad.
I was just looking the notes here, and I thought the Mogan Avraham said that you could.
Mogan Avraham said what?
You could take the bad leaves from the good, as long as they were still edible. And
nope.
Yeah.
Nope. Mistake.
Okay,
absolutely a mistake. I don't know where you got that mistake from, but I'm not going to take the blame for it. Sorry.
Okay, I thought I got it from you, but I'm going to erase it.
I will. Oh, you keep notes?
Yes.
Wow, somebody actually keeps notes. Yasher koyach. Well, if you want to share the notes with the class, you're more than welcome to send them to me before a test, and I'll go over them, see if I agree, and then I'll go over them.
Different papers, so it's kind of.
I'm sorry.
I'm writing it on different papers. I don't keep.
Oh, you write it on paper, not in a computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, I'll see.
I'm not typing it up.
Okay.
That's not happening. Sorry. Okay, I will, since you brought up the Magen Avraham, for argument's sake, I will bring up the Magen Avraham on my computer and I will read it where it says, the Magen Avraham says, even if these leaves are not complete waste and they are fit to eat in a case of the chak and pressing circumstances, nevertheless, it's forbidden to remove the bad from the good, meaning to say that the bad leaves from the good leaves.
So you have to hold and pull the good ones out.
Okay, so here's the thing.
The bad one in your hands.
Here's the thing. The Mishnah Berurah explains, if the only way to get to the good leaves is by removing the bad leaves, then you're allowed. If the bad leaves are like that, then you could take them off just because it's like peeling an orange or a banana. Here he's talking about if you could, it's just on one side, you could take out like that, then better to take it like that. Or if they're mixed up in a bowl, you know what I'm saying? They're not on the head anymore. They're mixed up in a bowl, you take the good and leave the bad. But if they're surrounding it, then you can take them off out of the way. Alter Rebbe doesn't say clearly, but surely the Alter Rebbe holds you're allowed to eat bananas on Shabbos, or oranges, or eggs, or any of those things where the bad is surrounding the good, because that's
not edible. I don't want to say
so that's more reason to be lenient, not more reason to be strict. So, fact is, it's derech achila. Yes.
Do I need to separate the bad leaf from the good leaves from my hand, or I can just at the end of a letter cut it, and so they will be loose?
Can you cut off the bad leaves? Cut off the bad leaves or cut all the leaves at once?
All at once. At the
yeah,
end,
you can for sure.
Hold at the end, right?
Yeah, no problem. You could just cut off the bottom that holds them together and then take the good from the bad. That's no problem. Cutting only the bad ones, I'm not sure. But if you cut off that head that holds them together and then take the good. That's no problem. Okay, we continue and we say, number 5, hey, when do we say this? That you're allowed to take food from food. If it is all one species. If you had 2 different types of foods that were mixed together, and you want to eat one of them immediately, and leave the other one to eat later. The one that you want to eat immediately is called oichel. And the second one is considered psoiles. Therefore, you have to take the one you want to eat from the one that you don't, which is the equivalent of the food from the waste, rather than the opposite. If you take the food that you want with your hand, but that you're not planning to eat it immediately, you're planning to eat it later, chayev, big chiddush. They're both food. And you're taking the one you want, and you're taking it by hand. You're just not doing it for immediate use. That's the same as if you were taking food from waste. 2 different types of food, one you want and one you don't want, are considered exactly the same as food and waste. And it's mamash a Torah violation to not follow the guidelines that we have for food and waste. Meaning to say, good from bad, with your hands for immediate use. And here comes the answer to Reb Shmuel Leib's question from yesterday. What was the question? I don't know, because there were so many questions, it's hard to keep track of them. But I think the question was, if you want to eat both of these foods, you have 2 foods on your plate, they're mixed up. You want to eat both of the foods. You're planning to eat one, but you're also planning to eat the other in the same meal. You just don't like the fact that they're mixed. You want to eat them separately. So is there a rule as to how to separate them? Is that your question, or did I just make it up?
No.
That was your question?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. You have a
Filter fish and salmon.
filter fish and salmon mix is not so common. You have a salad. You have a salad with cucumbers and tomatoes. Whatever, cucumbers and let's keep it simple. Too many things are going to be complicated. Cucumbers and tomatoes. And you decide you don't like the taste when they're mixed. You're going to separate them. You're going to have cucumbers and you're going to have tomatoes. And it so happens you want to eat the cucumbers first and you're going to eat the tomatoes later in the same meal. So we have a machlokes. Some say, well, since you're eating both of them in the same meal, they're both considered for immediate use. They're both oichel, because you want to eat them both, and they're both for immediate use. So it makes no difference if you take the cucumbers from the tomatoes from the cucumbers, because they're both considered oichel, and it's both for immediate use, because anything in the meal is immediate use. That's one opinion. The other opinion says, no, the one that you're planning to eat before the other one, that's considered immediate use. The one that you're planning to eat later, even though it's in the same meal, but compared to the other one, it's later. That's considered like the waste, like the one that you don't want, because you don't want it right now. And therefore, you have to take what you want first out from what you want second and eat that way. Who says what? I don't remember, but I put it into that handout, and we'll review that later.
So can't you just take some of the mixture, put it on your plate, and then pick from that what you want?
That you can do for sure. There's no question about it.
Rather than picking from a bowl.
Yeah, there's no question. You can do that too. No problem.
But why? If you look on safe basis, that and then on סעיף ג' ואינו קורא לאתר סמוך לסעודה ממש, ואם לא אכלו עד לאחר שעה, אסור. So can we say like if you eat it in the hours, it's good?
No. Shah here doesn't mean an hour. It means a later time. Sometimes Shah means an hour, sometimes it means a later time.
Okay, but some of the Sudator, it's even doing Sudator.
I understand that, but here's the point. Here's the point of the other opinion. Other opinion says that even though you want to eat it right away, but because you don't want it right now, it's considered psoiles compared to what you want to eat now. In other words, sometimes we have a situation.
It doesn't mean that it doesn't want it now. That's when he doesn't want to eat it together.
No, he actually wants to eat one before the other one. Kach balo. Lama? Lo yedea. Kach balo. He wants to have cucumbers first and tomatoes second. So comparing the two, one is, even though they're both oichel, one is more like oichel and one is more like, a little bit more like psoiles. Here's the thing. We're going to see when we get to the sugya of turmus, hopefully not today because I didn't prepare it properly, when we get to the sugya of turmus, which we mentioned yesterday, whatever this bean is, lupine or artichoke, I don't know, whatever it is. So we're going to see that even when something is they're both oichel, but one is a little bit more psoiles than the other, it's still considered psoiles. You understand what I'm saying? Here they're both oichel, you're eating them right away, but one you want first, one you want second. So comparing the two, one is like oichel, one is like psoiles.
So that can be to be a little bit tricky about this case. So the first scoop that I'm taking like tomato and cucumber.
Yeah.
And after this, I'm just going to stick to the cucumber, so I'm going to finish it. And then I'm going to eat tomato. But I already taste from the other food also.
Wow, I don't understand what you're saying.
Huh?
I don't understand what you're saying.
I have the tomatoes and the cucumbers.
Mixed or not mixed?
Hmm?
Mixed or not mixed?
Either one. Well, I say you already separated because you didn't decide what you're going to eat first. But the first scoop that you're taking tomatoes and cucumbers together.
So what? Zu gesund. La briut.
So I just saw the intentions are going to eat from both. But now I'm finished the cucumbers first. And then I'm finished the tomatoes. So it's boring.
I don't know.
Or just
Too complicated.
Separating on the plate already considered the bowl.
Too complicated, I don't know.
No, so wait. Not the separating on the plate is considered already a bowl even before I start eating it.
Of course, the separating is the separating. Eating is not boyer. Separating is boyer.
But I separate it. Now I'm taking the from them. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and I eat it together.
Bakasha, there's no problem to mix. There's no opposite of boyer. You can mix. It's only forbidden to separate. To mix, bakasha, go right ahead. Mix as much as you want.
That's the action on the plate. What counts.
Of course, it's the separating. It's the separating. That's what counts. If when you separated, there was no preference which to eat first, then it's for sure allowed. If you want to eat them both now, you don't care which one is first. So then you can for sure do it according to all opinions, because there is no good and bad. Yeah.
Tomatoes and cucumbers. I decide to eat the tomatoes first.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I'm full, I don't want to eat the cucumbers.
No problem.
No problem.
No problem. In fact, you never have to eat the cucumbers. You never have to eat the cucumbers.
As long as it didn't separate them on the plate.
No, if you separated tomatoes and you decided not to eat the cucumbers, it's okay.
You just said you're not supposed to separate them. Because it's going to be weirder.
What do you mean? If you separate what you want to eat right away, that's okay. If you separate what you want to eat right away, that's okay. That's the rule of boyer.
So what's wrong with the other part to eat?
What do you mean?
If we separate the tomato and the cucumber.
Yeah. How? Which one do you take from which?
The sides mixed together. So just pulling tomato closer to me that I'm eating now.
If you take what you want to eat, that's fine. If you take the one you don't want to eat right now, that's when we had a bit of an argument. If you take the one.
With his, you have the two type of food. He's going to eat what he wants now, and the other one he's going to eat later.
Yeah, but even if he decides not to eat it at all, it's no problem.
Why says it machloket?
Machloket is if you're planning to eat it in the same meal, maybe you could take the one that you don't want to eat right now away from that one, because since you plan to eat it in the same meal, maybe it's all considered oichel. Maybe there is no psolet. You see what I'm saying? That's why some say you can take either one from either one. Just like if you were going to eat them both right now, you could separate whichever one you want from whichever one you want, because they're both oichel. That's for sure. Some say anything you're going to eat in this meal is all like oichel. Okay. Ein iser mishum boirer. Oh, we said that already. How did I get back to Dalet? Hey. Hey. No, we said hey already. Sorry, Vav. 6. Shnei mine dogen nikraim shnei mine oichlin. Two types of fish are considered two types of food. Vasa liver biyade ela isam insur it's a alter. And it's forbidden to select by hand only the type that you want to eat right away. And not from one meal to the next. Even if the one is bigger and it's recognizable separate from the other one, it's possible that it's not called breira at all. Nevertheless, one should not be leaning kisafik chiyuv chadas hu. It is a doubtful chiyuv chadas. Okay, listen carefully. There is logic to the argument that would say, if you have large pieces of salmon mixed in with small pieces of tuna, that it should be permissible to take out the large pieces, even if those are the ones that you don't want. You want to eat the tuna, not the salmon. You want to take out the salmon and leave the tuna. Normally, you can't take what you don't want away from what you want. But because these are big and these are small, and it's clearly different, maybe that's not considered a mixture. Just like we said yesterday, if you have bottles on the table spread out, that's not considered mixed. You could take all the Coke off all the tables because they're not mixed. So you could say the same thing, big and small, it's not really mixed because you could see each one separate. There's logic to that argument, but you could argue with that argument. You could say, no, the fact is they're mixed, even though you could see them as separate and distinct, but they are mixed together. They're not actually separated. So the Alter Rebbe says it's better to be strict. It's possible that it's a Torah violation. So better to not rely on that argument and say that they're separate. No. Don't take what you don't want. Just take what you want. That way you get out of the problem. If it's one species, even though you're taking the big ones from the small ones, this is not called selecting at all. Because everything is fit for eating and there is no waste. And you're allowed to do boyer in whatever way you want. Even to eat later on in the same day. I'll give you an example of this before we continue. Somebody told me that he chooses everything he's going to wear Shabbos morning. This is a super organized guy. Not many guys like this in the world that I know. Super organized guy. He chooses everything he's going to wear Shabbos morning before Shabbos. No. Same. What are you talking about? Chooses everything. He has his shirt. Pants are the same. He has his tie. Everything is separated. Come Shabbos morning, he doesn't have to separate. So I told him, It's very nice. You're organized like a shy. You're welcome to continue your good ways. But I said it's not a shaila of boirer, because all his shirts that he's taking from are Shabbos shirts. I mean, if they are. He's selecting, he has 10 shirts. Which shirt is he going to wear? He is selecting the one he wants, but they're not really different. You understand? He's not selecting a Shabbos shirt from a weekday shirt. He's not selecting a men's shirt from a boy's shirt. He's selecting which one of his 10 Shabbos shirts he wants to wear today.
Because all the things are probably different.
The same color, they're the same thing. Doesn't make a difference. That doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference. Exactly. It would have to be a different type of shirt, a blue shirt, a polo shirt, something different, or a kid's shirt. So then he's separating something different. Then we would say, well, you can only take what you want and only right before you do it. So you can't do it Friday night. You have to do it right before. So
What if they're different colors?
before Shabbos starts, let's see, that's an extra. But if it's all Shabbos shirts, same thing with ties. If all your ties that you're selecting from are dress ties and fit for Shabbos, if you have different ties, Shabbos, weekday, and you're choosing a Shabbos tie from amongst ties that are not necessarily Shabbos ties, so then I understand you have to follow the protocol, take what you want from what you don't want right before use. But if all the ties you have, or at least all the ties you have on this rack are dress ties, you could separate it, good, bad, right before, not right before, because it's all the same.
What happens if you take one
Yep,
and you look and you say, no, I don't want that, you put it back and take another one?
no problem. No problem.
Because they're all the same.
They're all the same, even if they wouldn't be all the same. But if you're taking what you think you want,
And it's not what you want.
it turns out it's not what you want. You put it back. That's okay. As long as you're trying to take what you want. Or you take what you actually want, and then your wife tells you that you don't want it. That's another option.
That's what you have.
Yes.
Don't tell.
Question? I thought I heard a question here from the computer.
Yeah, I was asking, but you answered it. I was saying, well, what if they're different colored dress shirts? But I guess it's the same thing as a tie. It's, you have, they're all,
Different colored dress shirts are not different unless, I actually saw this in the Dirshu Shulchan Aruch. He says different color shirts, I think it's the name of Moshe, different color shirts are only an issue if you treat them differently. Meaning to say, if you only wear white on Shabbos, so then for you, it's different. White is different. But if you consider all dress shirts to be Shabbos shirts, regardless of color, then it's not going to be different. Okay, we continue and we say, Zafilu. Yeah.
Found out about this situation from this guy because he
Yeah.
asked the Shiloh.
No, he didn't ask the Shaila. He was just telling me. He was telling me how proud he was of his caution in Hilchos Boirer that he did it all before Shabbos. So when I explained this to him, so he came back to me with another opinion of another rabbi. He's a guy who likes asking rabbis. He came back to me with an opinion of another rabbi. The other rabbi said, well, he does have some weekday shirts. He does have some weekday ties, non-dress ties. So there is a point to his chumrah. It wasn't, the other rabbi insisted that it wasn't a made-up chumrah, and I should let him keep his chumrah because maybe he's taking Shabbos from weekday. So I was masking.
It's not going to hurt him to do it.
Yes.
So Yom Tov does 3 days as well.
That I don't know.
That never came up again.
That I don't know. No. Okay. Umur deliver the Inyan Sheyirtze, and you're allowed to do breira in any way that you want. Even to eat later on the same day, like we said before, because it's not breira, it's not selecting. You can do whatever you want. We said this all in the Ramah. Even if there are two types, but you're taking all the big pieces, whether it's one type or the other, from the small pieces, or vice versa, obviously. But it's allowed because he's not specifically taking one species from another. Okay, here we are by the Turmas beans. So instead of discussing the Turmas beans, we are going to discuss the notes that I sent out.
It's not, you see the back, I'm like, something.
Yes.
We're talking about the, something like the,
No Turmas. Alter Rebbe in the back discusses two things that have to do with butter.
People don't be careful, have to be careful, something they do from Shabbos.
Turmas?
I have stolen, but something we want to support. No?
There is something about butter there. There is something about butter there, but it's not about Turmas. It's about the fly in the soup. Alter Rebbe in the back says not to rely on the head of the taz to take out a fly from the soup with a spoon and a little bit of soup, but rather to tip out the fly, to tip it out like that.
It's only in English, not in
No, only the Hebrew, and even then, only the old print of the thick ones. But it's in the back of the Shulchan Aruch also. I don't have a Shulchan Aruch maybe. It's in the back of that Shulchan Aruch. You'll find it also. Hilchos Rabsa l'Shabsa, it's called, and he has three things over there. He has what I just said. He has about not eating nuts because of what we discussed before, and he also has about yeah, that's about nuts. About nuts. No, I'm pretty sure that's about nuts. No, read it. There's another thing over there about. I don't think so. Tumas is very unique. Okay. We're going to go through a few things that I found in the Mishnah Berurah, a few things that I found in the Yalkut Yosef, and a few things that I found in the Dirshu Shulchan Aruch that basically brings down the later Achronim. And some of them I already shared with you as we were learning, some of them not. So those that I already shared, we'll just go through it quickly. Okay, the Mishnah Berurah says, notes. Mishnah Berurah says, number one who selects in a forbidden way may not eat until after Shabbos based on the Pri Megadim, unless it was b'shogig based on the shalah. Wow, that's a mistake. Based on the gra. It rhymes. The Yalkut Yosef. Yeah, it's not the shalah, it's the gra. Yalkut Yosef says one can be mekel, especially if one mixes it back in and selects in the permissible way. Okay, so we discussed this yesterday, but the Pri Megadim is not sure, but he thinks that perhaps it should be aser be'achila if a person did burger. The Mishnah Berurah says, however, that b'shogig you be mekel based on the Vilna Gaon's opinion. We mentioned that yesterday. The Yalkut Yosef gives various reasons why the achronim are mekel. First of all, the food did not change. Second of all, there was a permissible way to do it. He just did it in the forbidden way. And third of all, like we said yesterday, if you mix it back in, maybe that's considered like you reversed what you did wrong, and then you can select it in the permissible way. There's no forbidden reverse. You can do it, that's the point. Okay. Now, for your information, if you look later in number 17, I wrote an interesting point here. The Isser B'diavad is only on eating, not benefiting. This is from Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So, that which we say that you're not allowed. You don't have it? What do you have?
I thought I printed it from yesterday.
Oh no, the one from yesterday is newer.
This one has numbers 19. Okay.
No numbers?
No.
How did that happen?
It says notes. So.
Yeah, it's fair.
I don't know how that happened. Because yesterday I had numbers too. It just wasn't as much as today's. Without numbers? I don't know why.
Notes in Siman 319 once so far. This is Mishnah Berurah. No, it's Mishnah Berurah. It's the same thing.
I don't know. Both of them had numbers, so I don't know.
The one from yesterday have no numbers.
I don't know how that happened. In my document, it had numbers. Somehow, when it sent it, it got confused. I don't know.
I have numbers.
Okay.
Yesterday it said Shabbos 74A.
No, that was the intro. That was the intro.
Yeah, right.
I sent out notes yesterday also later. Okay. Anyway, the bottom line is, here's a chiddush from Shlomo Zalman, which honestly I didn't look it up in the source, so I don't know what he bases it on. But he says the Isser B'diyevet of Boyer is only on eating, not on benefiting. So if you did a forbidden Boyer and you're following the opinion of Mishnah Berurah that it's forbidden B'diyevet, it's only forbidden if it's a food product, forbidden to eat. But if it's a shirt, you did a forbidden Boyer, you're allowed to wear the shirt. Understand?
So it's going to be only on Ochlin.
Only on Oichlin, not on Hano. I don't know where he knows that from, honestly.
Which was on Ochlin.
Shlomo Zalman, Auerbach, exactly. Okay, number 2. One who is eating with a group may be Boyer for them. One may even be Boyer for a non-Jew. So the fact that you're not eating for them or with them doesn't make a difference. I mentioned this yesterday. Mishnah Berurah says you can be the caterer, the chef, the mashgiach, whatever you are. You're preparing for other people, even though you're not eating. It's still derech achila. That's part of achila. Sometimes you help other people eat, and also for a non-Jew, because that's just like you can have a guest. You can prepare for your guest. If your guest is not Jewish, you can prepare for him. That's his derech achila. And we're going to see later, even for an animal, that's the animal's derech achila. You're helping him eat. It's okay. Okay. Dirty fruit and the like are like spoiled lettuce. This is the chiddush of Mishnah Berurah. Just like we said that spoiled leaves of lettuce from amongst a good head of lettuce, midrabanan is considered boyer. So if you have fruit, some of them fell on the floor and they're dirty compared to the rest of them that are clean, that is similar to spoiled leaves of lettuce, and you cannot remove the dirty ones. I'm saying, but you cannot remove them to rinse it because you're selecting them. Understand? Unless you want to eat them, unless you want to eat the dirty one. So I'm taking what I want. I take it, I rinse it, lakasha. You understand? But if you're not going to eat it right away, you can't take them to rinse it. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Now, number 4 is to explain.
Excuse me.
Yes.
On
Yeah.
this dirty fruit, isn't that similar to what Ronnie was saying yesterday about lettuce that has some salad dressing on it or something? And can you wash it off? It's here, it sounds like you're washing the fruit off, but it's dirty.
What did I say? That you can wash off the? I have to make sure I know what I'm. You can't wash it off. Is that what I said?
I think so.
Okay, I'll take it back.
Sour is considered mixed together.
I think it is considered mixed together, but you're still allowed to wash it off.
Okay.
Just like you can wash the dirt off of fruit, which is a question. Why are you allowed to wash the dirt off of fruit? You're taking the bad from the good. Okay, that's a question, and we'll get to it. It is a question. Okay, maybe that's the heter. It's a question, maybe.
Wash fruit, vegetable.
Yeah.
Or you have to wash them with
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a question. Well, is it so pashut that you're allowed to wash fruits and vegetables? Because maybe water is like a keli, and maybe it's not derech achila. Maybe it's like using a keli, which is usser, even right before eating. That's a question. I'm not saying it's usser. I'm saying everybody discusses.
No, that's
Everybody discusses why it's mutter, but it's a question why it's
why
mutter.
you word and it's a killing.
Because it's an outside item that helps you do the boyer. It's not you're just taking the good. You're using a method, you're using an item that's going to help you separate. You understand? And that's actually one of the ways of separating, going back to kitnius, for example. One of the ways is they used to put the kitnius in water and the beans would fall down, and the peels would float because they were lighter. And that was like doing it with a keli. You couldn't do it even right before, because that's like using a keli. So what everybody discusses why.
This the way you used to do it. You let them in a kelly. You let the show float like garbanzo beans and all this stuff. You soak it in water, let the white shells float up, and then you remove it.
Exactly, and that's derech boyer. That's not derech achila. That's derech boyer. So everybody washes fruit. I mean, serve grapes, you wash them first. Apples, whatever. So everybody discusses why it's different. We'll get to that. Okay. When selecting for later use, number 4, people use various methods, not necessarily kli. The point is, the Mishnah Berurah is explaining, why is it a chiyuv chatas? Why is it a Torah violation if I use my hands to select for later use? I mean, if the normal way is to use a keli, so I shouldn't be chayav to do it by hand. It should be kalachar yad. Just like if I use a keli that's not the usual one, if I use a knoin or a tamchu, if I use like a funnel or a plate, that's not the usual way. It's not chayav. So if I use my hands, even if it's for later use, it should be pater. The Mishnah Berurah explains, no, when it comes to selecting for later use, it's not unusual to use your hands. Sometimes people use some items, sometimes people do by hand. So that's not considered a kalachar yad.
What do you mean by later use here? Does this later use mean like for this next meal, or like
exactly
later on?
Instead of the upcoming meal, a later meal?
No, so this is meaning for a later meal or for the upcoming meal, right?
A later meal.
So that's us.
Why if I'm selecting for after the later meal, for after the upcoming meal, why it's a chiyuv chadas, even though I don't use a keli?
Oh, that's what this is saying. Is this,
Yeah.
So when you're still chayav?
Exactly. Okay, number 5. We mentioned this yesterday. Sweet and sour apples may or may not be the same species. The Mishnah Berurah states with the question on that he doesn't resolve that. Cooked and roasted meats are considered 2 minim. Meat of different birds are 2 minim, just like we said that about fish. It's possible that moving unwanted stuff out of the way to get to the desired stuff is not brave. We mentioned this yesterday. Okay, you have a pile of shirts. You don't want any of them because they're not Shabbos shirts. Underneath the whole pile, you have one Shabbos shirt. Like we said yesterday, you don't have to grab it and pull it and make a big mess. You can take what you don't want away, even though you're taking what you don't want from what you want, but it's just because that's the only way you can get to it. So that's not called boyer, that's just called moving it out of the way.
Can you put it back?
Yeah, why not? Makasha, put it back. Okay, one may also do breira, good from bad for immediate use in order to feed an animal. We mentioned this before. And we are going to see later in the Dirshu, he goes into some detail about that, about what's psoilus, what's oichel when it comes to an animal. We'll get to that in a minute. Number 10.
In number 8, is it any case like that for food? Or I mean, or I can see, we're for clothes, but is there any example of food?
Yeah, why not? If you have a bunch of cold cuts stacked one on top of the other, and the one that you want, and it's a different type, you have the pastrami or the bologna or the salami, and the one that you want is on the very bottom. So you can pick up the other ones to get them out of the way and take the bottom one.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. I will point out that the Mishnah Berurah says it's possible. Because it's a chiddush, it's his own chiddush, he says that it's possible. He doesn't say it like an absolute psak, but that has been accepted as the psak.
Why do you use Rashi Muta?
Sorry? Why does he use it?
The word possible, not Muta.
Because I'm using the Mishnah Berurah's language. The Mishnah Berurah says, if you want the language, ve'efsher, im tluyim kama begodim, chapasach habigdish aroitze, lo yavi b'chal boyer. Ve'efsher. So that's what I wrote. Okay. one may not separate, this is number 10. One may not separate two types of oichlin unless one intends to eat one of the types immediately. My friends, this is a big chiddush. Pay attention and you will know it. Let's say I have two types of oichlin and I don't want to eat either of them right now. I just want to separate them because I want to be organized. I have my apples and my oranges in the drawers of the fridge and they're mixed up. I want to put the apples on the right and the oranges on the left. So there's no oichel and there's no psoilus because I don't want either of them. So is that boyer or not?
If you separate?
If you separate,
Yes.
Mishnah Berurah says it is. Because even though there's no psoilus here, the fact is I'm separating two types and I'm not eating them. The whole heter to separate is if it's derech achila. Here I'm separating two types. I'm not eating them, so that's boyer.
Basically has no purpose to do it.
I'm sorry?
Two types of flowers.
Challah and the flowers?
Two challah, one is from white flour, the other one is from whole wheat flour or spelt challah.
It's probably two species, probably.
So when you make-
Definitely spelt and wheat is separate.
okay, so
Whole
when-
wheat and white, probably, I'm
okay,
not
so
sure.
let's say so if you white seed and one,
Yeah,
just need to cut one,
yeah.
so the other one is. or
No, one and one is not butter. Two, one and one is not butter because that's not a mixture. They're just side by side.
And
I'm
even
sorry?
if it was a mixture, you would take the one you prefer.
Yeah, but you don't have to. Either way is fine. Question?
If you have a bunch of salads,
Yep.
just stacked up,
Yep.
and you take two different kinds, you still make a motzi on the one, you cut the one you prefer.
Yes,
So
that's no problem. Yes, correct.
Is immediate use for derech achila? Or
Yeah.
because before we were talking about taking the Shabbos shirt.
Immediate use is derech achila, or it doesn't have to be achila. If you're using it for wearing, it's derech levisha.
But
If you immediate,
immediate is one of the one of the
Exactly.
requirements.
exactly for whatever you're using it for, it has to be immediate.
Is derech achila could derech achila be seasonal? For example, like we were talking about the lettuce, so Pesach,
Yeah,
right? We want to take off the lettuce, the outer, to peel it,
yeah,
right? Take off the outer leaves, whatever they're called, right?
Yep.
To eat the inner,
Why? What's wrong with the outer?
same like peeling. same like
Say the outer
peeling
ones are
sweet,
like the outer
right,
ones are
for
not so
chametz,
good looking.
You know, for minhag.
Oh, for
For
chametz.
minhag, right? But we wouldn't do that
Oh,
in
for
July.
chametz. Now I have to. Now we're getting serious. Now we're getting serious. Are the outer leaves considered soiless because you keep the minhag of not eating the outer layer of foods on Pesach?
Yes, that's the question. Right. Much
So-
more eloquently stated, but that's what.
So here's the thing, my friends.
What was the question again? What was the question?
The question was, if you're removing something for a halachic reason or a minhagic reason, so to speak, it's not actually different physically, but it's different because of a certain religious reason. The example given here is that you want to take off the outer layer of leaves on Pesach because you follow the minhag some people have to peel everything on Pesach. So here's the thing. Some say, they don't address this particular question, but some say that when you select something that is, if something is two things, some are kosher and some are not kosher, so the kosher is the good, the not kosher is the bad. And you have to take the good from the bad. And the same thing would apply to Pas Yisrael, not Pas Yisrael, Mishalakam, not anything. Alter Rebbe does not say that. Alter Rebbe holds that because they are physically the same, even though halachically they're different, that's not called Ochlam Pselis. Ochlam Pselis is a physical difference, not a halachic difference. He actually has that here on the notes. He quotes that. Let me see if I can find the note for you. Note 23. See also section 500, which states that even when a kosher food is mixed with a non-kosher food of the same type, since the non-kosher food is edible, it is just that the Torah forbids it. It is not considered as undesirable matter, and these rules still apply. Alter Rebbe says a similar thing, by the way, about lechem mishnah and non-lechem mishnah. This is a common problem with matzah. You wanna have shlemas. You have a seder. You have 26 people coming. 10 of them want their own seder plate. You need 30 complete matzahs. You got a big job. You got to go through however many boxes till you get 30 complete matzahs. Some poskim say you cannot do it on Yontif unless it's for immediate use, because they're different, shlemas and non-shlemas. One is good for lechem mishnah, the other is not good. They have a different halachic status. Alter Rebbe doesn't hold to that. Alter Rebbe says it doesn't go by halachic status. It goes by physical status. A complete matzah and a broken matzah is the same. They're not different. It's like a big piece and a small piece. They're not a different species. And the fact that it's halachically different does not make it oichel and psoilus, or even like two mine oichlim. So according to the Alter Rebbe, you can do it on Yontif, even if you're not going to eat right away. You can even take what you don't want away from what you want. You can take the broken pieces out of the box. No problem. Bakasha, it saves time. Takes a lot of time to find those matzah. It saves time. Otherwise, before every seder, before every meal, you're busy looking, taking. The organized people, not only do they separate the shlemas, but they put in separate bags a kazayas for each person. So this is a kazayas for you, kazayas for you. Who has time? You're going to do it anyway. The question is, are you going to do it while they're waiting? You're going to do it before. That's the only question.
Yeah, label Miller taught me that.
What's that?
You fix them.
Oh, by with a match, the blowtorch. It's a match. It's blowtorch. Okay. Yeah, I hear you. Okay.
Big job. Through all those pounds of matzah.
Yeah. Okay, we continue and say, but like I said, there are poskim who say that there is a difference. I don't remember if it's I think it's the Maharil. I think the Maharil holds that there is a difference. Okay, Yalkut Yosef, number 11. Eating with a fork or a spoon is not considered to be using a kli, as this is simply an extension of his hand. Okay, we know you cannot separate with a keli. Even good from bad, even for immediate use. But you're allowed to eat with a fork, and you're allowed to take what you want from what you don't want with that fork. Why? So the Yalkut Yosef explains, because the reason you're using a fork is not to help you select. The reason you're using a fork is because you don't want your fingers to get dirty, and you don't want to look like a Neanderthal. So that's all. Moshe adds that this is only true if the selection is not easier when done with the implement. In other words, if you're using a fork and that actually makes it easier for you to select, that's not pashut. Then it's forbidden. You understand? It has to be that it just protects your hands from getting dirty, but not that it actually helps you select in a more effective manner.
But it's something like greasy. And if you go to pick it up, it might slip it. So with a fork, it's easier.
Yeah. That's not because it helps you separate. That's because it helps you hold it. That's okay. That's okay. If one was boiler by hand for later use, one should eat it right away, as this may minimize the isser. A person made a mistake, and he did boiler for later use. Took the good from the bad for later use. Do we say farfallen? Too late, nothing to do, or not? So the Yalkut Yosef says some people say that even though when you took it, you plan to eat it later, and that's mamash chiv chad is very severe. But if you change your mind and eat it now, that fixes it. So now we're going to consider it as if you did it for immediate use if you eat it immediately. So putting it back in is not going to help. You can, but it's not going to help. It's not like turning off a light. Turn on the light, turning off doesn't help. On the contrary, it's only worse. If you're putting it back in doesn't hurt, but it doesn't help. But eating it may help, because then maybe it's considered as if you did it for immediate use. One who selected for immediate use must actually use it immediately, lechatchila. Right? If you select it for immediate use, you actually have to use it. You can't say, well, now that I selected it out, I'm not going to eat it. If you change your mind for a legitimate reason, that's fine. But you shouldn't just stop, change your mind after you did the selection. Number 14, I mentioned this before. One who mistakenly took a piece of pseudus tzedakah has done no wrong. So you're trying to find what you want, and into your hand came what you don't want. That's not called that you did anything wrong. Number 15 is exactly. Number 15, some say 1 hour before a meal is considered close to the meal. Others say it must be right before, when the people leave shul. I mentioned this before, that some people understand hour to be literally an hour. Others say it means no, immediately before, it's not an hour. Okay, here we are in the Dirshu. And as you'll notice, I gave the source, because the Dirshu basically brings all the achronim, so I tried to write who says what. Okay. First of all, if a guy was buried, but it could have been done in a permissive way, it's not also b'diavad. So we know that if a guy does a malacha for you on Shabbos, if it involves any kind of benefit for your body from that malacha, you cannot benefit. Right? If a guy cooks for you, I mean, it could be a shalat bishalakum, but even if it's not bishalakum, it's hot water. No bishalakum with hot water. Nevertheless, you can't drink that hot water, right? Because he might do it again. You might ask him to do it, so on and so forth. When it comes to boyer, Reb Shlomo Zalman says, even if he did a forbidden boyer, but if he could have done it in a permissible way, he chose to do it in a forbidden way. That's his choice. That's not called benefiting from the guy's malacha, because you don't care how he does it. You didn't tell him to do it in a forbidden way. He chose to do it in a forbidden way. So there's no issur to benefit from that.
It's like washing dishes.
Exactly.
Hot water.
Exactly. Correct. Okay, 17 we mentioned already. This is only eating it, not benefiting. Okay, here's an interesting question in number 18.
But why does he say b'diavad? Lechatchila, it sounds like then you really shouldn't. But b'diavad, since he did it already, it's okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's true also that it's even lechatchila, mutter. You can't tell him how to be boyer. You understand?
Oh.
But if you could tell him to make the salad, and he'll choose how to do it in a permissible, however he chooses is okay.
So I'll just cross that out, b'diavad.
I'm not going to cross it out because that's what he says. Cross it out.
I see.
I'm just going to say that I don't think it's dafka only b'diavad. It's as long as you don't tell him how to do it, it's okay. Number 18, Rabbi Moshe forbade the use. Okay, this is an interesting question. Yeah. Okay, so some people put rice into the salt shakers. You know what I'm talking about? Because it absorbs the moisture, so you don't get clumps of rice. Clumps of salt. Excuse me. So Rabbi Moshe says, can't do it. Can't do it on Shabbos. Can't use such a salt shaker on Shabbos. Because every time you shake the salt out of the shaker, you're taking the taking the salt which you want from the rice which you don't want, using a keli, using the salt shaker. Not allowed. Reb Shlomo Zalman was not sure about this. Or Yashiv was lenient. The rice is there before Shabbos, but it's mixed in. It's all mixed inside, rice and salt, not separate. When you salt with it, you're taking the salt out from the mixture.
The main thing there was using a keli.
You're using a keli, exactly. Even though it's for immediate use, you're using a keli.
What in the case if the rice can also come out?
Then it's okay. Most people don't do that because it's a bother to have raw rice kernels in your salad. But if you do that, then it's okay.
No, you can't because one time it's
Yeah, but that's not usual. It's not usual. Usually the holes are too small. So others permitted, like I said, because they hold that since that's not your intention, and it's not an act of clear boyer, I mean, what are you doing? You're doing an act of salting food, and the fact that this the rice is staying behind is not your intention. They say it's permissible. Number 19. When preparing for many people, one may start as long before the meal as necessary. Chazon Ish says not to start in any case until half hour before the meal. We mentioned this yesterday. Number 20, we mentioned this yesterday too. One who's leaving the house and wants to take stuff to their destination. Some say they may not select at all. Others are lenient. We mentioned this yesterday. Here's 21, something new we did not mention yesterday. One whose friend wants to borrow something now for later use, but the lender will be unable to lend it to him later. Shlomo Zalman holds that the lender may select item now as the lending is considered the use of the item. Well, Yasha disagrees. Listen carefully.
Is it even not food?
There's a difference, food or not. You're lending somebody something. You have to choose what he wants. He wants a certain specific item, and it's all mixed up. You have to find what he wants. He doesn't need to use it until later on in the day. But now is when he's at your house and he can borrow it. Later on, he's going to be on the other side of town. There's an Erev or whatever. So Yashiv says you can't do it. He's not going to use it now. Shlomo Zalman says no, because you are doing the mitzvah of lending it to him. That is your use. So you're allowed to do it. I'm using the object to perform the mitzvah of lending it to him. That's my use. His use is not going to be till later. My use is right now to lend it to him. It's a nice word. Okay, number 22. If one is selecting an item in order to warm it and then eat it, Rabbi Yashiv holds that this is not considered for immediate use. Some say that if it's the normal way, that if my wording here is no good. Some say that if it's the normal way, take out the second if, to warm that food before eating it, then it's allowed, as this is considered the way to eat it. Okay, again, you have food that is mixed up, and you want to take the type that you're going to eat right now, but before you eat it, you want to heat it up. Rabbi Yashiv says no good, because the heating up makes it that you're not eating it right away. Shlomo Zalman says, I mentioned this yesterday, if the normal way to eat this food is to heat it up, so therefore it's all considered part of derech achila, because you're just preparing it for eating. Number 23, if one is separating an inedible peel from edible food for an animal, he should remove the oichel food from the pselos rather than the reverse, unless the oichel is inedible for the animal. Okay, listen carefully. Listen carefully, my friends. This is a chiddush of Shlomo Zalman. Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasei quotes him, but it's from Shlomo Zalman. So you want to feed your animal the bran of the grain. You have grain mixed with bran, right? Subin. And you want to feed the animal the bran. You're going to keep the grain for yourself. Waste on the animal. Okay? So what you want to give him is the bran. So normally we say 2 types of food. One is good. I mean, they're both good for the animal. So take what you want from what you don't want. No, here it's different, Shlomo Zalman says. Because for the animal, the grain is better. So therefore, the grain is better. He can eat the morsam. If you insist, he'll eat it. But he would prefer the grain. So comparing the two, the bran is like the pseudos compared to the oichel. Just like we say by the turmasin, that even though they're both edible, but if one is more edible than the other, the one that's more edible is the oichel, and the one that's less edible is the pseudos. So for this animal, the one that he would prefer is the oichel, compared to the one he wouldn't prefer, which is the pseudos. Even though you want to give him that one because you don't want to waste a good one on him, the fact is it's an inferior product. So that's considered the pseudos. Rather, separate out the better one rather than the worse one. Unless, he says, unless the animal cannot eat the oichel. Unless he can only eat the pseudos. Well, then for the animal, that is the oichel, and the other one is the pseudos. But if you can eat both, you cannot take the worst one from the better one. So
I think the better one is better for you, not necessarily for the animal. Better.
Well,
Actually,
but
it would also
yeah,
be
but
better for the
because
animal,
it would be better for the animal. It would be better for the
but
animal.
you don't have to kill it then.
Right, exactly. Okay, 24. If one was boyer and then decided not to eat, or if he had leftovers, they have not transgressed on boyer, the food may be eaten at a later meal. Okay, that's obvious. I'll mention it too. 25. One may use a sink. Here's the chiddush, my friends. You know, you have the sink, has a hole in it. You don't want to have all the little pieces going down the hole. So you buy one of those screens that you put in there and it catches all the things. Oh, so what's that? You're being boyer with a keli. It's a keli. So how do you pour water mixed with junk in there if the keli is helping you be boyer? So the answer is that it's all psoilus. It's all psoilus. The water is psoilus. You don't want it. You have no use for it, and the food is psoilus. And the only reason you're separating it out is not because you want to separate the two types of psoilus, which we said before. You can't separate two types of oichel, even if you're not eating either of one. If you're not eating either one. Here, you're not separating two types of psoilus. You're simply stopping the big pieces from going down the drain and blocking the drain. That's all. You're not actually separating them into two groups, and therefore it's permissible. That was number 25. Number 26. If one wants to separate two types of food to eat, he plans to eat the right. Okay, that's the one I mentioned before, yeah? About Shmuel's question. So I already discussed that. Let's continue. So, but he says the names here. I wrote the names. But Moshe says you have to eat the one that you want to. You have to remove the one you want to eat first. But Yasha says you can select either one. Number 27. If one removes onions from a salad, okay, here's a very common thing in my household. Some of the kids don't like peppers, and some of the kids love the peppers. So it's a daily occurrence, maybe not daily, but common occurrence that the kid who doesn't like it doesn't eat it, and that everybody else is fighting to get it. So what about separating what you don't want, taking out what you don't want, and giving it to a person who wants it? And Itaka wants it. So Shlomo Zalman says, if he wants it, and you know he wants it, and he's right there wanting it, then you can separate it, even though your main objective is not to eat it. After all, you care about yourself more than him. Even though we have after l'recha kamoicha, etc., kamoicha, like yourself, but he's not actually you. So your intention at the end of the day is that you don't want to eat the pepper. That's why you're taking it out. You're also happy that it's not being wasted and your friend is going to eat it. Nevertheless, because he is going to eat it, that is considered oichel from psoilus. You're allowed to do it. But he says you can't first do it and then go find somebody who's going to eat it. And you can't do it and then convince somebody that he wants to eat it. You have to have somebody who's there, who actually wants to eat it, then you can do it. I'm sorry? No, because just like you can do for yourself, you can do for others, like we said before. That's also derech achila. Even though at the same time it's fixing it for you, but it's fixing it for him. So it's both, so it's okay. Okay, you cut open a rock melon, right? What are they called? Honeydew? Honeydew, cantaloupe. And you have the seeds sitting there. So the seeds are considered like separate. Like we said yesterday, the carrot is like sitting on top of the fish. It's like a separate thing. You can remove the seeds. Now, what if there's a few individual seeds that are left? So Reb Shlomo Zalman says they're considered separate. And Yasha says, no, once it's like one or two, it's like stuck to it a little bit, then it's shine level. What do you do? I mean, cut around it? No. We gotta figure this out. Give me a moment.
Can you separate that? What is it?
Give me a moment. You know what? I think this is what he says. I think what he says is as follows. When it's separate, like it's all sitting in a little thing, so then it's not considered boyer. You could do it even if you're not going to eat right away, because it's considered separate. Once you remove that, and there's a few still there, if you're going to eat it right away, it's okay, because it's derech achila. It's like a peel. You're just getting it out of the way. But if you're not going to eat it right away, then Rabbi Yasher is strict. He says you shouldn't do it.
But you can take the majority.
Oh, well, yeah, but how are you going to get it? I mean, you could take the good from the bad for sure. But to take off the peel, if you're not going to eat it right, the seeds, if you're not going to eat it right away, you should not do according to Rabbi Yasher. Shlomo Zalman says no, it's considered separate anyway. So you could do it even in advance.
So you don't have to take some of the.
No, you don't have to take some of that. No.
What about watermelon? Where there's a lot of seeds and it's inside and you can't scoop them out.
So
Why the seedless?
I don't know.
Why the watermelon seed?
definitely the seedless are recommended, no question about it. But there is a heter for actually taking out the seeds. Although you could just eat it and spit it out, but there is a heter for taking the seeds out.
So wants to separate?
Yeah. The heter to take it out is that it might be considered derech achila, the way to eat. So as long as you do it right before you eat, not in advance, that argument has been made that it should be considered the way to eat. Just like we're going to see later about fish bones. Some make that argument about fish bones, as we'll see. Yeah.
I have a question. Once you cut it, you're not separating?
You cut it, and then you have seeds.
No, but when you're cutting, you're
No,
separating.
because
No.
it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
You're allowed to cut things.
Now, you're allowed to remove some of the oil with the result?
You don't have to.
No.
No. It's considered like separate. They're not considered mixed. It's sitting on top of it. It's not mixed in with it. Now, if there's one or two seeds left, then it's better to not separate it until it's right before the meal. But if it's a whole thing of seeds, then you can separate it even in advance because that's not considered mixed. Whenever it's not mixed, you don't have to follow these rules of good from bad and right before the meal and so on because it's not a mixture.
You're not separating.
Exactly. So, in connection with this, we have an interesting chiddush in 29. What if you have a bunch of cutlery? Because as we're going to see later, cutlery. As we're going to see, boyer applies also to items. It's not just to food. We'll get to that later. But first, so you can't separate out forks, spoons, knives, That's serious boyer. So here's your idea. I have all this cutlery, right? In a drying rack, whatever. I'm just going to throw it on the table so it all spreads out. And now it's separate. So I can take whatever because it's not mixed anymore. Right? We said yesterday that it's not clear exactly how far apart it has to be considered not mixed, but what people consider that it's not mixed is not considered mixed. So however far you have to spread it, you spread it, just throw it out, and now it's all separated. So are you allowed to do that on purpose? Are you allowed to take something that's mixed, spread it apart, and then once it's apart, it's not mixed. I can take what I want. So 3 opinions here. Ready for 3 opinions? Rabbi Moshe says yes. Actually, 2 opinions. I thought there was 3, but I'm not seeing 3. I'm only seeing 2. Rabbi Moshe says yes. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman says you can do it only with 2 different people. One person does the spreading, and the other person can take what he wants, whatever. But if it's the same person, it's considered like one long act of separation and selecting, which is not forbidden. Not permissible. Okay, number 30. If some chalas are better than others, that's not considered tumin. 31. Different pieces of chicken are considered 2 species. Some disagree. Drumsticks the breast, the triangle, whatever they're called, different types of, people have different things, what they like, what they don't like. So some say that those are considered two species, some disagree.
That kind of is not in line with the Alter Rebbe's.
Sorry?
That's not in line with the Alter Rebbe. It seems like.
Why do you say that?
Huh?
Why do you say that?
Because I thought, if you had the same kind of fish, but, you had different, well, no, I thought if you had the same kind of meat, like, you said you had roasted chicken or boiled chicken, but these are all roasted chicken, even though one's the drumstick and one's the...
Right, so that's the question. Are drumsticks considered like a different species or not?
Oh, okay.
That's the question. That's not clear. Perhaps yes, perhaps no. White meat, dark meat, some people prefer one, some people prefer the other, but it's all chicken. Is it considered separate or not? 30, we have I don't paskin, I can paskin. When great achronim argue, I'm not going to paskin. Here's the thing, it's simpler to just take what you want from what you don't want. Whenever there's a doubt in boyer, just do it in the permissible way, you understand? If you like drumsticks, take the drumsticks. And then even if it is two separate meaning, you're taking what you want from what you don't want, and that's fine. I mentioned this earlier. Two different colored shirts are considered different species. It's a person's particular about which color he wears, or Moshe. 33, according to Zalman, one who is drying the cutlery. Okay, here's a big chiddush. Pay attention. Okay, we spoke about cutlery being a problem to separate. Reb Shlomo Zalman says you have the cutlery drying from Friday night in the drying rack. Take one at a time, not paying attention to which one, dry it, and put it in the right place. You have the section in the drawer for the knives, big forks, big spoons, little spoons. But you can't purposefully take the knives, dry them, and put them away. Forks, spoons, That's actual boyer. If you just take whatever comes to your hand, dry it, oh, it's a knife. Put it with the knives. Take whatever comes to your hands, oh, it's a fork, put it away. Whatever comes, big fork, little fork, back and forth. That's okay. Same thing according to Shlomo Zalman. If you have a pile, you take the top one, it's a chumash, put it away. Next one, siddur, put it away. What you can't do is you can't take the pile and say, okay, I'm going to take out all the siddurim, put them away. All the shemoises, put them away. All the laikras, put them away. You understand? Because there you're looking for a certain type. But if you just take whatever comes, not saying you don't know what it is, you don't care what it is. I'm going to have to put it away. You understand? That's Reb Shlomo Zalman's chiddush. As long as you're not looking for the siddur, you just take whichever one comes to your hands and you put it where it belongs. Now, Rav Elyashiv disagrees with this, but this is Reb Shlomo Zalman's opinion. Now, 34 explains that even this is only mutter because your objective here is not to select. Your objective here is to put it away. It's in the way. You need the space. So the way you're putting it away is by drying it, and you may as well put it in the right place. But you can't do selecting. If that's your whole objective is to select, you can't say, well, I'm going to select in this method by picking up one at a time and then just putting it where it is. It's a different way of selecting. If your intention is to put it away, to make room, and so on, that's when it's allowed. Okay, my friends, it's been a pleasure. Next week, in Mitzvah Hashem, we have a regular week since Hashem arranged for Purim to be at the end of the week this year, so we can have a regular week of learning and continuing Hilchos Boyer.
Okay.
My pleasure.